Okay, well, I think most of our attendees are here, and yeah, Sabina just joined. Okay, so, and Mark's going to join us a couple minutes later, so why don't we get started? Alex or Dominique, would you like to introduce the project? Or do you have any opening remarks, or should we just dive right in?
I think Alex could introduce Jeff.
And I was just going to say that Dominique could. So the Heritage Conservation District is a project we've been working on for a while. So some of you may be familiar. We started this back in 2018 with the Heritage Conservation District study to see if it made sense to designate a Heritage Conservation District potentially. And so what we've done now is that we did find in the study that yes, it made sense to move ahead with the Heritage Conservation District plan and guidelines. So what Carly is going to present tonight is a draft of that district plan and guidelines, and we're really excited. This is a point we've gotten to with a lot of feedback from the public and a lot of participation from members of the public. We're really excited to be able to present to you this 90% draft. So presenting tonight, as I mentioned, is Carly. Also with us are Dominique Tremblay from the Township of Russell and Sabina Barrett. Mark Brandt from the consultant firm MTVA will be joining us shortly, not on here already. And we'd also like to acknowledge that we have some councillors joining us tonight. So I believe Audrey Brisson, councillor, is here with us tonight, as is Pierre Leroux, Mayor of the Township of Russell. I know there were some other councillors that expressed interest in coming, so they may be joining us as we're going through the presentation. So I'm going to hand it off to Carly to tell us more about where we're at.
Okay, so just first of all, a few opening remarks. For anyone who's new to Zoom or webinars or the technology that that the world is using during the pandemic, we have a question and answer section and also a group chat. So we ask you that you submit all of your questions to the Q&A feature, and that'll just help us to keep track. Sabina will be moderating the questions, and simple things she'll just go ahead and answer quickly, and other more complex questions that are better for discussion we'll go through during designated question periods. There's also a chat window where you can share your comments with the whole group. I think everyone has joined us from a computer app, but if you're only dialing in from your phone, then you won't necessarily have all of those features available. Okay. So this is the agenda for today. As you can see, we're pretty well focusing just on the guidelines, picking up where we left off last time. You'll notice about halfway into the meeting, there's a brief 5-minute break with the question period beforehand, and just to help you stretch, refocus, grab a drink, and then we'll just keep going. So for those who are new to the what we're doing here with the Heritage Conservation District, I'm just going to give a super quick background. So my name is Carly. Mark Brandt is the Senior Conservation Architect at MTVA, and we have Sabina here and Anastasia as well. We are the consultants retained to work on this project. This is our overall timeline. So we are here at this orange dot and just wrapping up the final phase of the designation process. Once we integrate all your comments and feedback, we'll be taking everything, the final document to council, and then they will vote on whether or not to adopt the HCD plan and create the district. We strongly encourage you to take a look at the previous work that we've done, particularly the HCD study, which is this one. And you can also find all our previous presentations and work on the website. For much careful analysis and consideration, we have arrived at a recommended HCD boundary line. It is centered on the Castor River and the surrounding historic commercial district and residential areas. This is the area with the greatest concentration of heritage resources and also where substantial future development can be anticipated. However, through careful management of change, we can still retain the heritage values. The recommended objectives of all of this is really just trying to manage change in a way that celebrates and respects the heritage values. We're not trying to stop change, we just want change to be done in a way that really complements and celebrates Russell. Conserving the buildings, promoting public awareness and understanding, encouraging new development, having clear guidelines, and reinvestment in the downtown core. Overall guiding principles include just, again, maintaining the natural heritage features of the district, including the Castor River and the tree canopy. And we also, of course, want to maintain built heritage, keep everything in good condition, make compatible alterations, and prevent demolition. We want to conserve and protect the public realm. So this includes the sidewalks, the streetscapes, parks, any places that people typically gather or visit. We want active street life and just, again, to enhance this village ambiance. And compatible new development, as I already mentioned. So we have divided up the district into a number of character areas. When you're walking through the village, you'll notice like 3 distinct types of village space. We have all our open spaces, including the parks and the river. There's also a very distinct traditional commercial core, and then the surrounding residential areas. Given the increased demand and desirability to expand commercial and retail space within the district, we have also proposed a mixed residential commercial heritage area, which is shown in orange. And this provides for careful future allowance of non-residential uses in carefully maintained residential type properties. So now on to the guidelines. First up, we're going to be looking at urban planning and the public realm. You can see that traffic management is in purple and in italics, and that's because we talked about this one last time. So it will not be a focus of today's presentation. You can visit the municipality website for more information on this particular set of guidelines, and of course you can also ask us questions about it. There are a lot of significant views and beautiful sight lines that we want to protect in the district. So viewscapes is a term that refers to the visual relationships between an observer and the built form and the natural features of the district that contribute to its picturesque character. And viewscapes have an influence over user experience as well. So the first protected viewscape are the river panoramas seen when standing on the Castor Bridge. They're among the best views in the village. We also have the sequence of unfolding views of all the majestic homes and architectural landmarks along Mill Street. And that's just a sequence of views. Whether you're traveling east or traveling west, it's quite a spectacular street to be on, and it's kind of the heart of the picturesque identity of the village. Going along Concession Street, likewise, there's a series of iconic views of many key properties. There's a lot of unique focal points and framed views, and this street contributes significantly to the first impressions of the district when you're arriving from the north or from the south. There's a significant framed view of the land registry office when you're entering the village from the east, from Embrun. And a lot of the neighboring buildings here you can see help to frame the view of this one spectacular landmark. Now we're also getting into the guidelines for viewscapes here. So just maintaining the dominance of prominent architectural forms and roof lines. So the church spire along Mill Street would be one dominant vertical object. Also like the gable roof. We also want to reduce visual clutter as much as possible. So that includes things like removing utility lines that are no longer in use and making poles and vertical elements stand upright instead of leaning over to the side. Another iconic viewscape is the Craig Street termination, right at Concession Street. And you're looking at these beautiful homes, finely crafted of unique local materials, again framed by buildings and poles and trees. And this is the first impression when you're arriving from Ottawa or from the west. Other guidelines that we want to consider for viewscapes include maintaining visual relationship, for example, between the driver and this home, and maintaining overall scale through compatible size and massing of built features. It would not be appropriate to build a 6-story apartment complex right here. New construction, additions, and alterations shall respect historic visual relationships. And one such relationship includes these homes overlooking the cemetery. And again, just this beautiful framed view coming at the end of Bank Street. So while the physical materials and design of the Concession Street Bridge are not heritage, the bridge does serve an important historic link, and it provides access to the protected panoramic views of the river. General best practice and the most sustainable thing to do is to just look after the bridge, keep it in good condition for as long as possible. And when it's time to replace it, we want it to be compatible, and there should be, and what that means in this case is we want access to the views to be maintained for both drivers and pedestrians. So we want sidewalks on both sides, and railings that will allow views out to the river. So the bottom image is from a little town not too far from where I used to live in Fenelon Falls. And it's got these concrete solid barriers that block all views to the river and the falls. You can see the river a little bit because the Google Street View cam is elevated so high, but honestly, I must have driven across this bridge 100 times before I ever knew where the falls of Fenelon Falls even were. That's not something we want for Russell. We also want boats to continue to go underneath just to improve the recreational values of the river. For street furniture, again, basically we just want compatible and a coordinated approach. So the top left photo is a good example of that. The top right photo is a bit of an exclamation mark, mostly because the various elements aren't really aligned that well. They just oriented kind of on the diagonal. And also we're not too sure about the green color. I'm not sure what colors, the color that always comes to my mind personally when I think about Russell is red, like just this red Russell brick. And again, for street furniture, one thing that's important to consider is the entire streetscape and how that contributes to the overall impression of the street. So you can see all of these planter baskets that have been lined along everywhere, and then the planters on the ground as well. And it just helps give this like really nice, coherent, special touch. Lighting is important. It provides character, ambiance, and consistency in the streetscape, helps increase a sense of personal safety and encourage continuous use of the street. We want lighting to be compatible with the heritage character and a coordinated approach as well. So an example, these new lights here they're not like protected as like a heritage material because they're pretty recent, but they're a really good example of something that's compatible with the heritage of the village, and they have this nice warm down lighting that doesn't impact the dark sky. You can also see the planter baskets here again, just considering opportunities in the lighting that where you can integrate things like banners and planters and other things that are going on in the village. And for placement, we just don't want to block the views. If you can provide the same amount of lighting just by moving the light pole away from the center of a building, then that's generally preferred. Signage and wayfinding. So coordinating municipal signage includes things like the street name signs here in the top right photo, and also entrance signs to the village. There's some opportunities here to enhance the identity and awareness of the district. Sometimes there are also welcome signs to the HCD actually as you enter the HCD. So one example here is embedded in the sidewalk, and it reads, "You are now entering the Port Hope Heritage Conservation District." Indeed, Russell brick is already in the sidewalk and in the landscaping, which is an interesting, really nice touch that kind of could fit into an interpretation plan and just bring awareness to the special material. We recommend developing a commemoration and interpretation strategy for all the various heritage values in the district, just to increase public awareness. And some things are already being done, including the various monuments that already exist, and salvaging historic materials and using them in new ways, like these Russell bricks that are at the entrance to a home. And of course, we have the fabulous new Heritage Plaque program run by the Russell Historical Society. We want to maintain these plaques and develop criteria to prioritize where new plaques can be added within the HCD. The plaques are particularly excellent for interpreting the intangible values and significant events like the Great Russell Fire. When public art is done well, it can enhance the vitality, cultural, social, and even economic values of the district. It provides an opportunity for a unique link to the past, present, and future. It's important to consider the context of where the art is located and making sure it's not blocking any views, and that it is compatible with the heritage character, possibly even expressing some of the heritage values of the district. Trees. Russell has amazing trees. We want this tree canopy to be protected as much as possible. So we're talking about having a permit, like a heritage permit, to cut down the trees. We'll get a little bit more into that later at the end of the presentation. We recommend restoring the tree canopy where it's missing along Concession and Castor Street. Historically, there are a lot of trees there too, like the rest of the village. Sadly, that is not the case currently. Part of the recommendations for this is just to make sure the utility lines are carefully placed so that they don't interfere with the branches or the roots of the trees. And we want to create conditions where the trees are able to grow very tall and be very healthy. And again, considering views. So you probably don't want to plant a big bushy coniferous tree right blocking the view of this house, because this is a protected viewscape and such an amazing place. So the next section of guidelines looks at intensification and new construction. Lot size, new construction, and additions were all covered last time. So we'll start with building height. The heritage character can easily be eroded by introduction of new buildings of an incompatible size. We want growth and increased density, but this needs to be compatible and respect the existing building height patterns. Existing buildings in Russell are typically between 1 and 2.5 stories high. However, historically, there was a building that was 3.5 stories high before the Great Fire. You can see that in this photo here. The tallest building in Russell right now is the spire of the church, and views to the church from the public realm are something that should be protected. The heights that are allowed are in these bullet points here. And this illustration of the traditional commercial heritage area shows how a tall building can be done really well, and that sometimes a smaller building is not necessarily appropriate. We have some more illustrations for mixed heritage area at the top, again showing how tall buildings can be done very well and can fit very comfortably on the streetscape, even if it's taller than the adjacent buildings. Of course, tall buildings can also be done very poorly, and there can be severe impacts on the scale of the village, as shown in this illustration of the residential heritage area. We already talked about additions in the previous meeting. However, we wanted to show you this new illustration of what we mean by compatibility. Note that the lower left is an example of a very large addition that's pretty much doubling the footprint of the building, but it still respects the original building by being behind and kind of pushed back from the main street facade. New garages and outbuildings. So typically in traditional 19th and early 20th century homes, garages were just one of many physically detached outbuildings and on a property. So one example where this is still kind of the case is in the top right photo here. You have this huge historic barn in the backyard. So there are very few character defining outbuildings in the district, but some of them, like this barn, are things that are really special and should be conserved. For garages, we prefer if they are detached and set back from the house, like this example in the bottom left. And the top left is okay as well. This one is attached to the house. Not as good, but still pretty acceptable. What I like about this design is that it's set really back from the house, and the gable roof form complements the gable roof of the historic home. What we want to avoid is putting new garages like front and center, just at the front of the home. So I understand the need for parking in a small town, having lived in a small town for many years. But we really want to avoid big parking garages and large paved areas. We recommend that municipal parking lots incorporate landscaping to kind of screen and mask the view of like a large parking area. And also we encourage street parking as much as possible. We understand that if more non-residential uses are being introduced to the mixed heritage areas, then probably more parking will be required at some point. What we're really trying to avoid is something like this in the top left, where you have the front lawns converted, like just completely paved over with asphalt. The landscaped front yards really are critical to conserving the residential character of these areas. The top right image is a lot better. There's a laneway to the where there's an additional parking lot in the backyard of this house. So this is good. This is something we encourage. However, this could still be done a little bit better if they kept the front lawn. The tree helps, and this little bit of green helps a lot, but again, there's room for improvement. If it can be proven that street parking, rear yard parking, and side yard parking is not adequate to support your business, then and only then would we consider front yard parking. And we still want the front yards to be landscaped, but there are some clever new ways to do this, including the reinforced grass, where the plastic grid will actually support the weight of the vehicle without compacting the soil, so you can still have a green lawn. Then there's this spectacular example of concrete grid pavers and a bunch of hardy, resilient plants in between where the tires of the vehicles would be. Okay, so before we take a brief break, we have a few minutes to address some questions. Sabina, have any questions come in?
There was one comment previously. I can't see it on mine, however, I had to jump out of the meeting and jump back in, and it's no longer in the dismissed section for me, so I'm not sure if you want to just check.
Okay, just a second. Is it in the chat window?
No, it was in the Q&A.
I think it's in the dismissed question.
Dismissed, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't see it, yeah, if you can't see it, then I can read it out for you if you want.
Okay, the Russell Weir is both a built heritage, 1916, and part of the natural heritage of the Castor River. It looks like the Weir is just outside the district. South Nation Conservation can offer more information on the history of this feature if it is of interest to include. Yeah, that's really interesting. I don't think that was part of our study area, but I'm just gonna bring up the map that we had at the beginning. So is the Weir to the east or the west? Alex or Dominic, do you know where it is? We can look into it a little bit later.
Allison just commented just to the east.
Okay, just to the east. Yeah, okay, so that's just past these parks. There's or just past these houses here. There's that little park, and then it's just past there. Is that what we're talking about?
Carly, it's Mark. Hi, I've been able to join a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Could you repeat what it is we're talking about at the start of the question that you read?
Yeah, so it's not so much a question as a comment, but Allison mentioned that the Russell Weir is both a built heritage and part of the natural heritage of the Castor River, and it's from 1916. And it looks like the Weir is just outside of the boundary of our district. And she recommends we look at the South Nation Conservation Authority to get more information on the history of this feature and if it is something we want to include in the district.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. That's something that I wish we'd known about a little sooner, but yeah, we'll look into that for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Allison also says it could offer nice views and aesthetic. Okay, so that's a good point. We'll take a look at that. Okay, so I guess we'll have a break now. It's 6:31 by my clock, so we'll get going again at 6:36. Yeah, I just did a quick Google search of the Weir, and the South Nation Conservation says that it's one of the most notable landmarks in the village. Constructed in 1967, downstream from the original 1916 dam site. I know where the dam is. The dam is that park that's just outside. So it's a little bit beyond what we were originally looking at. Let's bring it up. Okay. So the district ends right here, right now, as we've drawn it. This is the dam, and the weir is somewhere downstream of the dam. So it's still quite a ways out, but I'll go take a look at it for sure next time I'm in Russell.
Yeah, I couldn't find, I Googled it as well and I couldn't find it. I'm in the South Nation Conservation, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. So I don't know if you can see. No, I don't think you can. Anyways, we can talk about it later, but it's a little far away. Seems like a significant part of the river, like kind of the history of the river. Okay, so let's keep going. So now we're going to look at guidelines, more guidelines for the preservation of built resources. So last time we looked at doors and windows, commercial signage, fences, and hedges. We've made some updates to the commercial signage to better align with the existing bylaw and comments that we've received. We encourage you all to visit the draft guidelines posted on the municipal website to read the latest updates. First off, we'll just get started with materials. So just general guidelines for historic materials. Some of the traditional materials used in the district include local and naturally sourced materials like brick, wood, and concrete block. These materials are typically more sustainable because they're quite durable. They're easily maintained or repaired in comparison with many contemporary or synthetic materials. Brussels stamped brick originates in the district. One of the first quarries, I believe, was on Mill Street, though I can't find any evidence, at least not visible from the public realm of it. But this unique material is used throughout the district and also in many prominent buildings throughout Eastern Ontario. Boyd block was made in the nearby village of Osgood and is a very decorative, ornate concrete block. And some of it was very much like rectangular blocks, but they also made these decorative columns and other unique items. Stone is not really common in the village. Basically, the main guideline is just to keep your traditional materials in good condition. For inappropriate materials, when they reach the end of their service life, we encourage their removal, and any historic materials underneath can be repaired or restored, or you can replace the inappropriate material with the material that's more compatible. We encourage the use of high quality and compatible materials, contemporary materials, as well as traditional throughout. So again, coming back to masonry, some durable repairs. Using the right type of mortar for the brick. A lot of modern mortars are designed for different materials, and they can actually cause the brick to deteriorate quite quickly if you use the wrong material. If you use the wrong type of brick, if you put like a modern brick into a historic brick building, that can also cause more damage. So making sure you're using the right kind of repair technique. Salvaged materials can help a lot. Also for the Boyd block, like there's nothing like this that's even being made anymore. So if one of the blocks gets damaged, it's really convenient if you can find another block of salvaged material from a different building to make that repair. Also for wood siding, this is a good example of when, or a discussion that we've had about when it's appropriate to use a contemporary material and when it makes more sense to replace in kind. So if a small area of a traditional historic wood building is damaged beyond repair, usually it's actually easier and more economical to just replace those few boards in kind with the traditional wood material. But if it's like a really large area of the building, like more than 50%, that's in beyond repair, in really bad condition, and we would still prefer that you replace with wood, but we would also accept a high quality contemporary material, such as fiber cement, which matches the dimensions and the appearance of the wood. In general, traditional materials are encouraged for use all throughout the district. Looking specifically at materials for roofs and windows, general advice applies here too. Look after what you have. When it's at the end of its life, replace it in kind with the same thing, or replace with a compatible alternative material. There are lots of metal roofs within the district. There are modern metal roofs and also many historic shingle and metal shingle and pressed metal roofs with all kinds of decorative designs. Appropriate roof materials in Russell are all kinds of metal roofs and also asphalt shingles. The main one that I think probably would not be appropriate here, it would be a clay tile. And for windows, we talked about this a lot last time, but just again, vinyl windows are generally discouraged because they are not durable or high quality, typically. Wood windows are generally better options, especially if you already have the historic windows there. We would like to see those retained. So looking kind of at the overall form and design of a roof, rather than just the materials, gable and hipped roofs are most common, with lots of dormers and chimneys that all contribute to the silhouette and the picturesque character of the village. Flat roofs are typically only in the traditional commercial heritage area. Guidelines are basically to maintain the existing form, and if there are new alterations, like you want to add a new dormer, consider the silhouettes and the existing patterns throughout the streetscape and the neighboring properties. Skylights, fence, mechanical equipment should be located at a discrete location, such as at the back side of the building. Russell's a very colorful village, so there's no restrictions on color. Of course, it's nice to have a coordinated approach across the whole building, but we leave that to you. Porches and balconies are prominent features of buildings in Russell, with unique relationship to the streetscape because as they form this nice protected outdoor gathering space. We encourage conservation and just maintaining porches and balconies in good condition. So keeping on top of paint to prevent water from deteriorating the wood, and repairing or replacing elements in kind as needed. If you're adding new porches or removing a porch, you need to think about how this changes the appearance of the building and how that's compatible with the streetscape. Architectural details and decorative elements help to communicate the architectural style of the building. They also add a level of visual richness and delight. Oftentimes, these decorative elements have a function. For example, the cornices in this building also function as a drip edge. So they protect rainwater from hitting the walls and will deflect a lot of that water away from the building so that the brick stays in much better condition than it otherwise would. We encourage, again, conserving and maintaining all of these details. Don't conceal them with a new alteration, and wherever possible, if like reveal hidden details and features that might have been lost in previous alterations. Commercial storefronts are key features of the traditional commercial heritage area. They enhance the pedestrian experience and provide opportunities for businesses to market their products and services. Where original storefronts exist, or parts of them, they should be conserved. Alterations and designs of new storefronts must be compatible with the architecture of the building and with the streetscape. They should consider things like proportion, scale, rhythm, materials, and also nearby buildings. Contemporary designs are okay, as long as they're compatible. Also, new ramps and railings to improve accessibility should be compatible to the greatest extent possible. It's good to retain individual entry doors between units. Merging units is generally discouraged, but if you do that, then we would like to see that the individual elements are conserved just to maintain the rhythm of the streetscape. Traditional and compatible awnings are also encouraged. Modern equipment such as window-mounted air conditioners, satellite dishes, vents, solar panels, they should be located discreetly away from the front facade of the building. If you're installing solar panels and it's practical to do so, and you can generate a lot of electricity at that location, effort should be made to make sure that it is physically and visually compatible with the building, and it does not significantly impact the protected viewscapes mentioned previously. Restoration. So just a quick note in terminology. Conservation is an umbrella term in Canada that covers the three conservation treatments. So preservation, restoration, and rehabilitation are all fall under the umbrella of conservation. Preservation means keeping everything as it is. You don't want to change anything. You want to stop things from deteriorating. That's preservation. Restoration, on the other hand, is the accurate revealing, recovering, or representing the state of a historic property or individual component as it appeared at a particular period in history while protecting its heritage value. For example, the Canada Milk Products House, if you look at a historic photo from the book from Swamp and Shanty, you'll see that it had a balcony very much like what you see in this photo here. And then Google Street View from 2007 will reveal that actually that balcony somewhere along the building's history got removed. And the owner obviously took great care to rebuild it pretty well exactly as it had been based on its photo. Because of the pandemic, I haven't had access to the library, so I can't actually get my hands on that photo right now. But if anyone has a copy of the photo of this building from Swamp and Shanty with the original balcony, that would be awesome if you could send it my way. Anyways, guidelines for restoration. A true restoration must be an accurate reproduction based on physical and documentary evidence, such as historic photos. It's all about retaining and repairing the original material whenever possible, or replacing it in kind so it looks just like how it originally did. Buildings evolve and change over time, and sometimes newer changes or like early additions gain heritage values in their own right. So it's important to respect how buildings have evolved over time. It's not always appropriate to remove additions that may have heritage value. Rehabilitation is the third conservation treatment, and that definition for rehabilitation is the sensitive adaptation of a historic building or individual component for continuing or compatible new use while protecting its heritage values. Rehabilitation includes in-kind or contemporary replacement that is compatible with the building, and compatible alterations and additions which support ongoing use or change to an appropriate new use. A lot of rehabilitation projects in these days include sustainable performance upgrades. And for me, this is a really exciting part of personal interest. So just some statistics. In Canada, buildings account for 50% of natural resources used and 33% of energy used in the entire country. Buildings generate nearly 40% of annual global greenhouse gas emissions. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, improving energy efficiency in existing buildings is one of the most diverse, largest, and most cost-effective mitigation opportunities in buildings to combat climate change. So how can the HCD help with these goals? Thoughtful rehabilitation, which improves sustainable performance, is encouraged throughout the district. This requires holistic thinking beyond the latest green gadgets. Think instead about the impacts of building components, assemblies, and products over their entire life cycles. This means looking after what you already have. Sounds a lot like heritage conservation. First, conserve energy and resources. And once you've done that, then look into supplementing with on-site renewables like solar panels. It's important to understand the building and its inherently sustainable features, the existing elements which improve comfort and durability. Examples of inherently sustainable features include the cornice protecting the walls from the water. Also, double hung windows are amazing for ventilation. It's important to plan a strategy for improving sustainability in a way that's compatible and works with your building, not against it. Adding exterior storm windows to an awning type window that opens outwards doesn't really work because it would hit the exterior storm window. And caution should be used when thinking about insulating masonry because it can be done well, but if it's not done very carefully, it can also cause everything to deteriorate pretty quickly, which is not sustainable. We also encourage compatible interventions which improve the resilience of buildings to threats such as floods or high winds. Disassembly and removals. So In our office, we try to avoid the word demolition and instead use the term disassembly. Disassembly refers to the careful dismantling of a building in order to salvage its components for reuse or recycling. Regardless of the cultural heritage values, disassembly is always preferable to the typical approach of simply razing a building and putting everything in the landfill. And that has huge impacts on the natural environment. Contributing properties and built heritage is a non-renewable resource, and it's something that should be valued. Removal of contributing buildings is strongly discouraged, and it's only allowed under certain conditions, such as, if it's a health and safety issue or if a tornado partly destroyed it. And even then, you need significant documentation to back up why you're choosing to remove the building. Before any demolition permit will be issued, you will need to have the heritage permit for the proposed new replacement building approved. We will also need documentation of the building so that we have a good record of it. We strongly recommend careful disassembly of the building so that components and materials can be salvaged. We would like to require that the unique local materials like Russell brick and Boyd block, which are no longer in production and can't be readily reproduced. It'd be really great to require these to be salvaged for reuse, either in the new design or elsewhere in the HCD. We're still looking at ways of making this practical for both the municipality and property owners. So I'm not sure that it'll be a requirement, but certainly something that's strongly encouraged. Non-contributing properties, if you want to disassemble and remove those, that's something that's generally accepted once a compatible replacement building has been approved. Implementation. So this is really where the rubber hits the road. How does this impact anyone who owns property in the district? There are two types of permits. There are major permits and minor permits. Typically, it's the same form that's used for both, with the only difference being that a minor permit is reviewed by the planning department and the major permit is reviewed by the council. Many things are exempt from all permits, most notably maintenance. If you need to paint something, just go ahead. And please, please, please do not wait to repair broken gutters or downspouts. Just do whatever you need to make sure your building's protected. Also, these changes only apply, all these guidelines only apply to areas that are visible from the public realm, not hidden corners of the backyard, and certainly not to the interiors of the buildings. The general idea is that you will need a permit if you're making significant changes to your property. If you are replacing wood windows with identical wood windows, no permit is required. If you're replacing vinyl windows with more vinyl windows, no permit is required. Wood replaced with vinyl, however, requires a permit, but only a minor one. Changes to non-contributing buildings which affect the streetscape or potentially affect the streetscape, such as adding or removing a porch, will also require a permit. If you follow the guidelines, then approval should be pretty straightforward. If you're changing a flower bed or removing a shrub, you don't need a permit. But if you're converting your front yard into a restaurant patio, all kinds of hard materials, and getting rid of some plants, then that's something that you would need a permit for. We want to get your input on about removing mature trees. As you probably know by now, these trees are so important to the character of the district. So we feel you want to have some level of control And if there's no permit, then there's not really any way for the municipality to regulate it. However, we realize that sometimes trees are sick or hazardous and they need to be removed. And sometimes this has to happen very urgently. There's no time to wait for a permit if it's a safety issue. In these cases, we are thinking that a permit could be submitted after the removal has taken place. And if the planning department disagrees with the decision, then they might ask for a new tree to be planted to make up for this. We'd like to hear from you in the comments, maybe. Does this seem like a reasonable balance to you? Roofs, I'm just moving on to roofs. They follow the general pattern. If you're just repairing or replacing in kind, you don't need a permit. If you're changing the material, it's a minor permit. On contributing buildings, no permit for non-contributing. If you're altering the roof line or the form of the roof, then you'll need a minor permit. New garages and outbuildings, if they're visible from the public realm, then you need a permit. But if it's a little shed in the backyard of an interior property and nobody can see it, then you don't need a permit. If an addition is in a prominent location, visible from the public realm or in a key view, it will require a major permit. But if it is a small and discreet addition, just tucked away at the back that you can't really see, then a minor permit is sufficient. New construction and disassembly are always going to be major permits. The provincial policy statement, which comes out of the Provincial Planning Act, requires that significant built heritage resources and significant cultural landscapes shall be conserved. Where significant interventions are proposed or where proposals deviate from the guidelines, the municipality may require a cultural heritage impact statement to demonstrate that the heritage values will be conserved. The CHIS includes alternatives and mitigation measures, and the consultants will work with you to come up with a design that is compatible with the values of the district. This type of document is to be prepared by a qualified third party. The provincial policy statement also requires that planning authorities shall not permit development and site alteration on adjacent lands to protected heritage properties, except where the proposed development and site alteration has been evaluated, and it has been demonstrated that the heritage attributes of the protected heritage property will be conserved. The official definition of adjacent lands for the purposes of this policy are the properties that share a common border with the district or otherwise defined in the municipal official plan. The intent of this policy is to provide additional protection within the district from negative impacts of larger interventions outside the district. Small changes like replacing windows or roofs are not included here, but you can see how an extremely large addition or new building right against the sidewalk edge in either of these photos could negatively impact the heritage values and significant viewscapes of the village. Therefore, major interventions outside the district may still require a heritage permit or a CHIS, or CHIS. Okay, now we turn it over to you. Time for questions and discussion.
Okay.
Have any more questions come in?
Yes, there's a couple questions here. So we have two related to trees. So I'll just kind of work backwards. We'll talk about what you mentioned most recently. So Allison in the open question section has a comment related to the tree removal permit idea. So we'll start there.
Permits for removal of major trees seem reasonable. It is not a prohibition, just a review. Correct. Regrowing these community trees takes a lifetime. Yeah, and that's why we want them to be protected as much as possible. However, sometimes they need to come down. There's not really much you can do about it.
Okay, and also on the topic of trees, in the answered tab, I had told Dave that we would talk about this during the Q&A portion, just talking about maintenance to the tree canopy in relation to Hydro 1, for instance.
Okay, so Dave's question is it possible to align the maintenance of the tree canopy with Ontario Hydro's interest in annually trimming trees along our streets, perhaps by developing a plan to bury the utility lines and remove the supporting poles in the core area? Mark, can I give this one to you?
Sorry, I was working on Mark Lalonde's and Harry Baker's. So if you could read it again, I did read it earlier when it was first posted by Dave, but I've forgotten it in terms of the precise details. So read it again, please.
Okay. Is it possible to align the maintenance of the tree canopy with Ontario Hydro's interest in annually trimming trees along our streets by perhaps developing a plan to bury the utility lines and remove the supporting poles in the core area?
So, Dave, I take your question really as two parts. Is it possible to align with Ontario Hydro's tree trimming? So their program, if I understand it correctly, is basically to ensure that trees don't interrupt the safe operation of the hydro lines. So trees are regularly trimmed back away from the lines. And that, in fact, can be aligned. I've spoken with an arborist on this. That, in fact, can be aligned with proper tree trimming that one should normally do for trees that are in an urban situation. When trees are in the wild, we don't think of trimming them, but in an urban situation, it's often the case that we do. I have one in my front yard that I'm looking at right now that is going to be trimmed, not for hydro lines or heritage conservation reasons, but just for the tree's longevity and good growth and health, general health. So I took that first part of your question to mean, can the trimming for hydro lines be aligned with the trimming for good tree health? And I would say yes, and that's a plan that could be put together between an arborist retained by the municipality and hydro's people with perhaps some input by a heritage conservation professional. The second part of your question, where you said like one idea of an alignment with Ontario Hydro would be to bury the lines, and I suppose that's certainly eliminating the challenge of keeping hydro lines in safe, good working order. On the other hand, part of the character, part of the heritage presence, if you will, of a village. And in fact, as Carly mentioned, there can be additions to properties over time that become part of the heritage story. And our thinking is that part of the character, part of the heritage story is in fact the hydro lines. And while some people see them as unsightly and possibly even unsafe, from a heritage conservation viewpoint, they are a layer in the story of the development of the village over time. And visually, they actually add a certain character and a certain charm. Now, it is just as common that in heritage conservation areas that they are removed and buried. And in my view, they lose something. It doesn't mean that it's a no-go, but there is a strong school of conservation thought that you lose something with that. Heritage doesn't stand in the way of progress. Heritage is heritage conservation is a change management tool. So they are being removed for very solid reasons of safety or other functional reasons. I don't think on balance between heritage objectives and other municipal objectives that you could just stand in the way, just standing behind the heritage banner, if you will. However, if there aren't good reasons, such as, safety, for doing it, then from a heritage point of view, we would say that the heritage value of them would trump them. So kind of a long answer, Dave. Essentially, yes to looking at how keeping tree trimming aligned with the health of the tree, aligned with the hydro and safety factors reasons for tree trimming. Great idea. Would be something very useful for the municipality to pursue, may even become a recommendation in this report. So thank you for that suggestion. As far as burying the lines, I would say until we have, absolute proof that there are serious problems and conditions such as health and safety issues, we would recommend that we keep the hydro lines, the hydro poles intact as part of the one of the layers of the history of the village.
The other, just to add, the other challenge of burying the lines is that depending on how that is executed, it could damage the roots of the trees as well. So it's just something you have to be mindful of. If you're going to bury them, I guess try to consult an arborist to predict where the roots are and how to, just to make sure that the trees that are already there will continue to stay healthy.
And in fact, Carly, there are examples where in mature neighborhoods and in some cases even heritage areas, utility removals and burying was done in conjunction with other work such as sewer replacements and repaving. And that exact problem cropped up, and they ended up losing all of the trees and having to replant the trees from scratch. And as Allison said, that takes a lifetime to get that back. So that's a very serious issue, or can be, depending on the nature of the work involved.
Okay, so
Carly, I think just on while we're still talking about trees, Mark Lalonde had a question of sort of a broad question: what constitutes a mature tree? So maybe we'll just finish up the tree topic and then move on.
It's a great question, Monsieur Lalonde. Carly, I'm just going to step in and then maybe you can add something to that. It's interesting. We had a huge debate in the last few years in the city of Ottawa about what constitutes a mature neighborhood, because they were coming up with new bylaws for streetscape studies that are required for proposals for interventions into mature neighborhoods, new developments. And developers were saying, well, what are you calling a mature neighborhood? And so there was a whole debate about what that meant. As far as a mature tree is concerned, what's generally deemed to be the appropriate answer to that is there are arborists have charts where they have size by species. So not all trees by type grow at the same rates, and even the same tree, same type of tree, let's say a maple, in two different context situations will grow at different rates. So it's probably better to indicate the size, like the caliper, like the size of the trunk, the size of the canopy, by each species following their charts that are generally recognized, than it is to quantify it by age. So it's not necessarily whether it's more than 25 years. It would be if it's a type X species, then the caliper or the size of the trunk would be over a certain size, and or the canopy would be over a certain size. there are generally accepted sizes, and I'm thinking it might be useful for us to delve into that and get that into the report as well. Maybe
Yeah.
in the appendix we can just add those charts in.
Yep.
Okay, so next, I'm wondering, Carly, if you could go back to the materials section, I think roughly slide 38, 39.
Sure.
Harry had a question relating to materials. I just figured we could pull that slide back up and go over that a little bit further.
Here?
I think so. So I'm not sure actually.
I think was the next one, wall
maybe.
cladding.
Yes.
This is
for cladding. That's correct. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we're looking at is vinyl siding a modern durable material to replace wood siding? So I think we've touched on this, but I think we should elaborate a little further.
And Harry, we can always count on you for the good questions like this. Thank you so much. The short answer is if you're looking from a language point of view, purely from a technical language point of view, and if you were a vinyl siding salesman, you would probably promote vinyl siding as a modern durable material. In our view, and in the view of most heritage conservation professionals, there is a reluctance to classify vinyl siding as an acceptable alternative to wood siding. There are many people who say, well, vinyl siding can look exactly like the wood siding. We can make it the same bevel, make it the same thickness. We can make it even have a wood grain, a fake wood grain on it. What studies throughout heritage conservation districts around North America have shown is that once you hit a certain critical mass of vinyl siding, what was once a historic area, there is a feel as you walk down the street that it's lost its history. And a typical person on the street may not even understand explicitly that they're looking at Disneyland, but they have that feeling. And there are studies that were done in the States on this. From our point of view, vinyl it's visually different because of the sheen that you get from it. And that's why Carly used the example of cement board as the alternative modern durable material. Each municipality that we've worked with, we have to work this out. We have to talk about, do you accept vinyl siding? Do you accept aluminum siding? And our recommendation is always, we start from the point where we say, the only thing we really like to replace wood with is cement board because it really gives a sense of the wood and it takes paint the same way as wood. Most people want to replace wood siding so that they don't have to paint it every 10 years. And so sometimes that becomes controversial, but we will argue when this is debated with staff, so we get the final recommendations in the report. It's only at about 90% right now. We will always recommend no wood siding. So short answer from MTDA's point of view, no.
Okay, so that one's done. So I'm just looking in the answered section here. Mark had also asked another question. He just wanted to clarify. So he said, did I understand correctly at the beginning of the meeting that we wouldn't be discussing or entertaining questions on traffic items tonight, which, I mean, if you have anything specific, and this applies to anyone, you're welcome to ask now. So anyway, that wasn't anything specific, but we just weren't going to delve into that topic in the presentation. So if
You can still
if you can
ask your
squeeze
questions.
it in, you can go right ahead. Yes.
Yeah.
And then, so I think the last thing was just actually in the chat. So I'm going right back to the beginning. Back to the where, Harry had another comment saying the original where was built for fire protection. So just some more information there.
Cool.
And I think that's all the questions and comments that we have for the moment. But if anyone else has anything, please feel free.
And there, Harry, thank you for that that information about the weir. I mean, that constitutes, you know, a great story. It's a part of the history of the municipality, of the town. You know, fire protection was a huge issue in the 19th and right through to the early 20th century. And it's it's a vital part of the story. We will look at that we are in the dam a little further before tabling our final draft, and it's something that we would be interested in. But if it's quite far removed from the core area that's been determined to be the conservation district, it may be a problem, and it may be something that the municipality can pursue in the future as an individual property designation. But we will definitely look at it because, it's a great story. I mean, the history of Russell is about the river, isn't it? And so anything to do with the river, we wish that there was more evidence of some of the original mills around that you could see from the public realm, because that's the core story after, Aboriginal aspects of the story of this place. The mills really, and the river itself is really the core of the history.
We have another comment from Dave just relating back to the wood siding. He says, thank you, Mark. I live in a home built in 1867 and we still have wood siding. Let's keep the museum traditional. There are volunteers in the community that are prepared to help and repair, to help repair and paint the museum.
Oh, that's great.
That's great. And as it happens, Dave, MTBA was asked to weigh in on that controversy. And in our opinion, that is the first choice. It's not the only choice, but it's our preferred choice to just repair and repaint for that particular building, the Keith Boyd Museum.
Mark has sent another question, again relating to traffic. He's saying he would like to send some comments or questions after the meeting. Who should he send them to?
I believe those questions would go to Dominique or Alex. Also, I encourage you to take a look at our traffic section in the 90% draft, which is on the municipality's website. There are limitations to what the HCD can do, so it would be good to understand kind of what we've said so far, and we really welcome your feedback on that. So please send it along.
Yeah, that's so true. Both your points are good, Carly. One is people should have a look at that 90% report, because it may generate more questions and concerns. And your other point is that, we really encourage post-meeting comments and questions. They don't have to be at this meeting to send in questions and comments. And we're hoping over the next week or two that all the people here and all of your friends that you talk to will all have a look at it. And if you have questions, by all means, like we've said many times, this is a community effort and we want as much feedback as we can get.
Yeah. We have another comment from Mark. So, how our museum is restored will serve as a litmus test. Sorry, pardon me. for our eventual HCD. Hope it's done with a sense of authentic restoration with the more durable wood materials. Thanks.
We couldn't agree more, Mark. We're definitely on that side of that particular equation. Carly, I have one that I just wanted to mention.
Yeah.
That sort of came up while you were going through towards the end of the presentation. You were talking about contributing properties versus non-contributing properties. And you were also using that as part of the, I guess, the checklist. Yeah, that slide there, the checklist for what's required if there isn't an HCD declared by council and approved by the Ontario Heritage Trust, and it actually gets enacted. This is the type of checklist that you'll have about what are the restrictions in terms of new interventions into the district, whether there's no additional requirements from the current situation, or whether there's a minor permit required or a major permit required, and or if there is a cultural heritage impact statement, which is required. So that's what the checklist is about. The reason it's divided into the two columns, contributing and non-contributing, as Carly said, that pertains to each individual property. And it comes from, in case people have not been at previous presentations that we've had throughout the last, I guess, year or two over the course of this multi-phase project. Individual properties have a evaluation. It's going to be an appendix in the report, and that property is given a number on a scale of 1 to 4, and numbers 1, 2, and 3 go from the highest level of contribution of value to the district or character into the district, and then down. That would be number 1, the highest level, down to number 3. And then if it's rated number 4, it's considered to be non-contributing to the district. In other words, this would be a property that does not provide a sense of the character of the heritage value and heritage character of the district. And therefore, that's why more drastic changes to that property are more acceptable.
There's a new question here from James. How would an empty property be classified?
Entirely depends on which property it is. If it's a property that is waterfront or adjacent to a number 1 level property, it will be somewhere in the contributing zone of 1, 2, or 3. If it's an empty piece of property between 2 non-contributing properties, it might be an opportunity to give it a number 4, a non-contributor as well. And keep in mind, for those of you who love to land bank and invest in long-term development, is that a series of properties in a row that all are non-contributing will very much pave the way for new development, and that's great. But of course, the new development will still come under the guidelines of the HCD plan and guidelines. So that would be something to keep in mind, so that somebody who wants to land bank for long-term development doesn't think that they completely have a free rein just because all of the properties are non-contributing. I hope that answers your question, Jim.
Okay, well, that looks like that's it for now. But again, if you think of anything after this meeting is over, you're welcome to submit further comments and questions. There'll be more information about that on the township website to do so.
And I really like, I think it was Allison, I'm not positive, but it might have been Allison who brought up about the weir and, referenced us to the South Nation conservation. I think that's going to constitute a meeting that we'll have with them, not just about the weir, but we want to bring them into the process to a certain extent. Remember, the heritage includes both the cultural heritage and the natural heritage. So I think that's a great stakeholder for us to have perhaps a one-on-one meeting with, a distant meeting with.
Virtual meeting.
A virtual meeting, yes. So thanks again for that contribution. And I can't emphasize enough, any of you who would like to think things through and then ask more comments, or ask more questions, or provide more comments, or discuss it with your neighbors, and you know, talk about this. This is the time. This would be a great time for people to talk about the 90% report and provide any more feedback. Dominique, can you talk to that point at all?
Yeah, I just want to mention, so for those of you that don't know, Allison is from South Nation. So she's a planner responsible for South Nation conservation. And as part of the process, just to reassure members of the public, yes, this is a project coming from the planning department. However, all major departments from the township were also invited to review the document. So we've included the Parks and Recs director, and as well as the infrastructure department that were asked to review the document and make sure that they are involved and they understand the implication of the guidelines. So I just want to mention that as a point. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that people that are supposed to be involved are involved. And like you've mentioned, obviously the comments from the public is one of the most important key of the project. So I think it's really good as well that we have received good questions tonight that we will have to consider and see how this will be addressed. For example, the museum and the finishes, and so we'll have for sure other discussion and see where those discussions will bring the final report. So as per the final report, I think in the timelines, I think, Mark, that was your question. We are planning on bringing the final report to the first meeting of August at council meeting, which would be August 10th, to be presented to council. So we know it's summer and people are busy, but I think it's better now than later to for sure send myself or Alex comments from the 90% before it's completed and before it's presented to council.
So Dave Dyer just made another comment. Please include the 2 parks that South Nation Conservation Authority have in the community. These are unique. One being opposite the weir. Thanks for your help with this. I just, Dominique, maybe can you clarify like what parks those are? That's because there's the bridge, and then there's the Conservation Authority on the one side, and then like their conservation area.
Yeah.
And then there's that other open area on.
Yeah, there's another section from South Nation that it's along Forest Road, so it's outside the district.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's another one on the south side of the river along Church Street that is as well conservation area. So it's also outside the district. So I don't know if the question would be for us to include it as part of the district, but right now 2 are out of the district area as identified on your slide right now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, certainly something to keep in mind. So good to hear all your thoughts on this topic. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
And I think it's a question that I know the answer, but I want to hear the answer from Mark or you, Carly. So is the township exempted from those permits? So if it's a township property, would the township be exempted from the permit process?
The short answer is no. the intention that that our recommendation will carry, but we don't have a vote on council.
Mhm.
Our recommendation is that all public and private property within the HCD is treated equally, and that's why we've talked about having a CHIS when there's major road changes and things like that as well. So not it would be all public and private would be treated in that sense would be treated the same.
So I have a follow-up question. If a decision is made prior for this to be approved, what's the stage of like, is it the work to be completed before the HCD would apply to that property?
We're going to leave that up to council, but it's our role to point out to council what the different options are. Yes, you've just described option one, which is if the work is completed prior to the Ontario Heritage Trust approval of council's vote, to have that's the point where an HCD becomes official because it has provincial blessing and it's based on provincial legislation. So council votes. If they vote yes, they send it to the trust. The trust reviews it, and if they say yes, the moment that they say yes and it becomes public that they say yes, that's the moment the HCD is in effect. So option one is if the work is completed before that moment of public knowledge of the trust's approval of council's vote, then option one is if the work is done, it's done, and it was done before the HCD was declared. So that's all she wrote, and it doesn't come under the requirements, regulations of the HCD planning guidelines. Option two would be if the project was in the planning stage and council had some level of approval within that planning stage. Let's say there was a concept approval and they hadn't completed the design, or a design approval, but they hadn't completed construction, then that would come under option two. That would come under, sorry, this work was already, the planning for this work was already approved, and even though the construction wasn't complete, it was done, and that's the orderly transition that we'll have. But it doesn't come under the HCD planning guidelines because of that initial approval. And those are the two main options. There are some other more minor options with more details, and it's our role to point out those options to the council and to give them our views on them. From a pure heritage point of view, it would be option one, but we understand that there are other municipal objectives. There is sometimes a lot of money and effort that's put into projects that aren't completed and built yet. There is another, I guess I'll get into one other option without going into a ton of detail, but there's another option where it's still required to go through a CHIS just in order to acquire the mitigation measures that are recommended by the qualified heritage consultant who writes the CHIS. That's a slightly more complicated process because it means that the CHIS is written, if you will, with an asterisk, that the CHIS is not written to prevent the development or the intervention, whatever kind it is, but it's written in order to help the municipality then follow up with mitigation measures. So I guess I'll say those are the three main options, Dominique.
So what's the timeline in between council decision and then the province to approve the HCD?
It varies, and I don't know if COVID might have an impact, but
in a normal process, let's say in 6 months.
In a normal process, it takes between 3 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
We have a couple other comments from Harry here. The earlier one, Carly, he had sent you a photo of the Canadian Milk Products House.
Ooh, yay.
So you have that now. And then the most recent comment from Harry was, wow, you just opened up a big rush to make changes.
I believe that that's coming from my questions.
Yes, yes.
On the other hand, this is going to move fairly quickly. We could have a council decision within a month, and we could have the official designation within 2 months. So, you know, that there's a lot of planning of major interventions that can't really take place in as quick as 2 months.
Yeah.
Dominique, we would recommend that, and this is entirely up to you, but we think that when we present to council, we lay out those options, and in an ideal world, they would make that decision in the same meeting. So if they decide that they do not want to proceed with the HCD, then they don't have to make that decision. If they decide they do want to proceed with the HCD, we would recommend that they make that decision, pick one of those options at the same time.
And just maybe a follow-up question that could probably answer other questions. Is there more funding or grants that would be available for property that are designated under a HCD?
So there are federal programs that are no longer in existence, that there are many people hoping they're going to be revived in a new capacity. They would, in the past, they've only applied to commercial properties. There are provincial programs that have also been instituted in the past that are no longer current. Same thing, people are very hopeful that they will one day get reinstated. And then there are municipal programs, many of which still carry on today. The City of Ottawa continues to have one. In that case, it's not about the HCD, it's about any individual property within the HCD that makes the application. So, for instance, a property owner with a level 2 contributing property within the district wants to re-roof and do all of the gingerbread fascias, soffits, and brackets at the same time, and they apply to the municipality. And usually, not always, but usually these programs are matching grants up to a maximum amount. So in days gone by, I don't know if this is currently the case, but in days gone by, when I was on the committee that approved these for Ottawa, we had a program where we had matching grants up to $5,000 per property. So for example, if your project cost $10,000 and they gave you the maximum allowable, which they don't always, but they might, then they're going to basically pay half of the $10,000 because it's $5,000 max. But that is a program that would have to be instituted locally. It's not a provincial program. It's not a federal program. It's a great opportunity for the township. Once they get the HCD settled in, it's a great opportunity to look at funding programs like that. You know, it's not necessarily a ton of money, but sometimes it makes the difference between whether a project is feasible or not for a property owner.
Great, thanks.
Dave has another comment. This line of discussion concerns me regarding the timelines. If council is not committed to the concept, I'd be very disappointed. There are already a number of examples vis-a-vis signage design that run contrary to the HCD. Shame on those involved. I'd just like to point out that the guidelines only apply to changes moving forward, and unless the owner is proposing to do something with something that was done recently, the guidelines would not apply to things that have already been done. So,
of course, there are people are free to lobby them and say, hey, now that we have HCD plan and guidelines, why don't you consider following them. But that would be up to each individual property owner. It wouldn't be a requirement. I think I would like to make one other comment quickly about the timelines too, Dave. It's Mark. This process has been going on for years. Dominique will be able to tell you. It's been so long, I've forgotten. But Dominique's very young, so her brain is better than mine. She'll be able to tell you how many years it's been. And, during a period of many years, people could say, oh, geez, this HCD might be coming down. I better get, doing whatever I want to change. So I think compared to the potential 2 months that is left in the process, the many years that we've been going at it, I think if there was going to be damage, the majority of it would have been done by now. Council also has an option of putting a hold on development applications while it's at the Ontario Heritage Trust as well, which effectively cuts our timeline down now to 1 month.
Okay, I don't see any more questions or comments for the time being.
I have a question, and I don't know if she's still with us or not. I didn't know what Allison's day job was. Dominique, thank you for informing. Would Allison, when we want to touch base with the Conservation Authority, is Allison the person we should contact?
It's like I said, Mark, it's already been sent to Allison, and Alex and Allison are reviewing the report together.
Great.
So she's already been part of the discussions, and we are involving them as we speak.
Wonderful.
And it is with Allison and the entire team of South Nation that are working together on providing us with their comments.
Super.
I think I'm gonna just make a final comment. I've been obviously, when we introduced that project initially, people were afraid, people were scared. They didn't know what would involve a HCD, and I think we've done a pretty good job on informing the residents and informing members of council throughout that entire process of what a HCD would be and what it would consist of. Now I'm receiving comments that we've talked initially that we wouldn't force people to do select materials compared to another one, and that people are kind of seeing now that we're forcing them instead of encouraging them to maintain the HCD and their property as per the HCD guidelines. So I hope that the mentality will change, and I hope that people are open to change and are open to seeing that this will be just positive and benefit to the Township of Russell, and not something that we're forcing people or we're not forcing residents. I think we're helping them make the best decision to respect the HCD and respect the district. So hopefully we'll come up with wording that won't scare people, and that council will be open-minded to implement those changes. And I think we're pretty proactive and trying to protect that sector. And I think this is what we need to embrace moving forward, that we are proactive and we want to make sure that we're keeping what we have as we go. So
that's a great point, Dominic. And one thing that I would ask is, much earlier in the process, we tabled a report that was done, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, by the Heritage Resource Center at the University of Waterloo, called, the title of the report was something like Heritage Conservation District's Work.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of empirical evidence in there in terms of property values and ownership satisfaction and different things like that. Has that report been put on your website?
I know that report was presented to council back in 2015 when we started the project. That was basically the document that we've used to come up with the examples of success story and basically to resume all the background study that was done. And I think, yeah, Alex, it's more than, I thought it was 2015, but it was 2009. So yes, it was presented to council back then when we started that work.
I would also like to point out it is still available on our website. If you're at the Heritage Conservation District page, right at the bottom, there's kind of a tab that says like additional resources or other resources. And there's a link to the report by the University of Waterloo from 2009. So if you want to take a look at the whole report, that is available on our website.
Yep.
That's great.
Another...
I think the report was written in 2009, and Dominique, you probably provided to council in 15.
Yeah, maybe. Because I think we started all of this in 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's when I first met you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so the University of Waterloo also did a follow-up study. There's a second volume to the same report from 2012. So I can send that to you guys too, if that's something you also want to put on the website.
I think it would be really good, Dominic, to not only put that one up too, Dominic and Alex, but also somewhere very upfront in the page on the website that deals with this, you know, to help guide people in the community to it. And to achieve what you're trying to achieve, Dominique, that you were just talking about, that you hope people will be open to it. You know, this is, you know, evidence-based, fact-based stuff that it's pretty hard to argue with. And I think it would be a really good thing to have the community looking at it over the next few weeks. So if you can direct them to it as well as putting it on your site, I think that would be a good idea.
Okay.
I think we're done. I want to thank you for presenting this, Carly and Mark and Sabina. I think it was really specific, and I think it's more, it gives more an idea of where exactly we're going, and basically that's going to be left to council to decide if we're moving forward or not based on the wording that is in the document. Is there, and I guess that's my last question, because I'm receiving comments as we go and as you presented. There's a lot of wording in the document that it says must. There's a lot of information that it seems like it's going to be an obligation from the owner. So is there room for softening the wording?
Yes. Yeah. So there's definitely room for discussion on those things. So we will set up a meeting, Dominic and Alex, sometime after everybody's back from vacation, and we can go over the nuances of that, see the areas that where people have had the greatest concern, and we can try to make sure that we're finding the right balance of everything.
And I just don't want this to be presented at a bad timing for just one specific project. So yeah, we'll have to discuss this as well to see how it could mitigate all of the factors to make sure that it moves forward.
Yeah. The main thing is we're open for discussion. We want to hear from everybody on the call and all your friends and the people with the full spectrum of opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we care about what everyone has to say, and we want to make sure your voice is heard and that we can strike the right balance of meeting what we've set out to do.
And I just want to support what Carly just said, and also to point out that between the 80 and 90%, we did make a few changes on the wording like that. And there are a couple of places that were pretty strong about not changing, but I think, as Carly said, there is some place for further discussion, Dominique, and especially if there are specific concerns, there's definitely room for discussion. At the end of the day, if we weaken it too much, then it's not a strong enough document to be effective. So our job as a team, all of us, all the people working on this project together, our job as a team is to find that right balance.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, everyone, especially to the members of the community that took their time to join us on a sweltering summer evening. It was really great to get a decent turnout, even on a night like this, and we certainly appreciate all the comments and feedback that we can get, both from the municipality and the general public.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.